Until next time.
This is Legacy 1891, preserving the past for the future.
Welcome back. For more information on the ECSU archives, I'm Paige Hendrickson, the University Archivist. And today for this segment, we're going to talk about, well, first of all, the recap from my first one was about Intro to Archives, in case you missed it, where I just basically introduced you to the world of archives, what it is, what it isn't, things that we do collect and may or may not collect. But today I'm going to talk more about preservation, specifically for different types of materials, briefly, and cover the highlights. And then I'll get more into talking about the specific collections that we have within the ECSU archives. So for anybody wanting to know what we have and you want to come for more research, all you have to do is reach out. But at least this will give you some good information on what we do have. So for preservation, that may sound like a term you've probably heard before. Basically, you're just trying to keep the materials, the damage, from getting any worse. So you're not necessarily reversing any of the damage. That's more conservation. But preservation is we're just preserving things the way they are in the condition they're currently in so that they don't get worse. Now, as far as temperature and relative humidity, those are the things that are, definitely environmental conditions that play a big part in how archival materials, or any material for that matter, can deteriorate. So high temperatures are the worst, and especially with high humidity. So basically all of the southeast of the United States is pretty bad when it comes to high temperatures and high humidity. Bad combination because that obviously can introduce things like mold. We do recommend basically a broad range of between 55 and 70 degrees Fahrenheit in temperature, and for humidity between 40% and 60%. Now, if your humidity especially is too low, actually your paper can get brittle, but typically that's not a problem that we ever encounter much in the South, unless it's a very old document. And it depends on the nature of the paper, because if anybody out there knows much about paper making and publishing, things like that, the quality of paper has changed significantly over the I'm going to say centuries, actually, not just decades, but centuries. At some points they had better materials they used, and then sometimes they used rag paper or, other things and newsprint. Newsprint is not good quality paper, by the way, just in case anybody was wondering. If anybody has stored a newspaper for a long period of time, you'll know that it changes from the whitish color that it starts out as and turns brown or yellow very quickly. And they can get brittle very quickly because of the low quality of the paper. They were technically not meant to keep long term, because newspapers were literally for a day or a week as far as the publication rate that they were published. But they were supposed to be just news for the day and then tossed, and then you get the one for the next day or the next week. But yeah, we've kept them as a record of what's happened during that time in history, which is wonderful, but at the same time, it's still made on that terrible paper. So environmental conditions, again, can play a part in how things can deteriorate and how we can preserve them better. The storage environment, obviously the conditions where they're stored, whether or not it is climate controlled storage, whether it's inside or outside, if the weather plays a part, what container it's in, for instance, whether it's in a paper container, cardboard, for instance, or if it's in plastic or something else. Also, water damage, of course, is one of the main environmental conditions that can cause a lot of problems, whether it's staining, whether it's warping of the pages or paper. Of course, it can introduce mold with a high humidity. And then pests, all manner of pests, whether they're rodents, whether they're insects, anything. Can really cause a problem. Some things, again, can be somewhat preserved and kept the materials from getting in worse shape. Some things are irreversible. Always just kind of consult someone if you do have any questions or major damage that you want looked at. Try to find an archivist or someone even in a library that might know a little more. Materials include, like I've mentioned, paper, magnetic media, so any kind of AV, whether it's film recordings, whether it's vinyl, albums, whether it's a tape, a CD, anything like that, DVD. Also textiles, which include clothing, blankets, any type of woven materials like that. Different types of containers and preservation needs to be used on each of those. And they do all have their own specific temperatures and humidities that are best, but kind of a general rule, like I said, is the 55 to 70 degree and then 40 to 60% humidity. So some of the solutions can be obviously to improve the temperature and humidity conditions, which would be to either bring things indoors where you have some kind of HVAC system or a dehumidifier. But in general, just depending on the importance of the items, whether they're photographs, anything else like that, you may want to be just mindful about where you keep things like that if you want to be able to look at them again in, say, 5 to 10 years. Then you'll need to take a little better care of them maybe and bring them indoors if they're not already. Scanning, of course, is another option, but in my personal opinion, in my professional archival opinion, paper has proven itself over thousands of years. Electronic files and digital media, not so much yet. They're getting there, but they don't have everything worked out. So we're still kind of going decade by decade, sometimes year by year. Anyway, again, if you ever have any questions about preservation of materials, please feel free to reach out to us or anyone else in this field that may be able to help you kind of figure out a better solution. Now, as far as our specific collections that we house at the ECSU archives, so we really have 3 main categories: university archives, manuscripts, and special collections. So university archives is pretty much like it sounds, where we have the foundational and administrative records of the university, operations, things like that, whether it's, meeting minutes and councils, board of trustees, things like that, catalogs, handbooks, yearbooks, basically just the history of the organization. And then the manuscript collection are more unpublished works, whether they are paper collections or literally it could be a manuscript of a book, but most often it's just going to be papers collected during that person's lifetime, during that person's time at the university, something like that. So for instance, with the manuscripts, we have the president's and chancellor's papers, and then we also have community leaders, professors, past employees, alumni, people like that have donated their papers and collections to the archives to keep as part of the history. Now, the catalogs and handbooks, again, and the yearbooks are more part of the university archives history and collection that way. Now, the catalogs and handbooks start from the 1890s and actually go through the 2000s, so they're fairly current, honestly. And all of them are actually scanned and available electronically on Digital NC. And if you're not familiar with that, that's the North Carolina Digital Heritage Collection that's online through the UNC system. Also, the yearbooks, which start in, the earliest we have is 1925. They go through, I believe, 2012. And those are also scanned and online. And the greatest thing about the catalogs and handbooks and yearbooks being digitally scanned like this on Digital NC is they are keyword searchable. So if you're looking for a family member or someone else like that, you can click on that yearbook for that year, and you can actually put their name in, even just last name, and it will find it for you so you don't have to look at every single page. It's a nice feature. We also have them in our collection at the university library, so if you want to come and look at them in person, you're absolutely welcome to. Now, the next kind of collection I wanted to at least mention a little bit more specifically, the manuscripts. Some of the examples of people that we have some of the papers for, other than the presidents and chancellors. Leonard Ballou, if anyone knows that name. He was a music professor. He was the first archivist here at ECSU, and he started the archives in 1971. And he was the university historian. But he also served in many other capacities over the years, but those are just the main highlights that I would say are most relevant for his papers and collections that are in the archives under the manuscript collection. And just a little bit of trivia in case anybody might want to know this. Leonard Ballou's wife was actually the secretary for Martin Luther King Jr. when he was in Montgomery, Alabama. So just a little bit of trivia there. Another collection of the manuscripts we have is Evelyn Johnson, who wrote the first history book of ECSU and was also over the choir, a music professor, and head of the music department at different times. And, of course, Johnson Hall is named for her. Now, we also have Elisha Overton's papers. And if anyone's familiar with him, he was a local carpenter, brick mason, builder. He also had a funeral business at one point. And we have a lot of his personal papers, business papers, things like that in our manuscript collections. So if anybody wants to research him a little more. And then, of course, Hugh Cale, the founding father of ECSU. We have his papers as well. Now, some of the other university archives types of documents that we have are departmental histories. We do have some newspapers and news clippings. Some of the newspapers are on digital NC right now, and some will be in the future once we get them scanned. Some clubs and organizations. We also have pretty much all the event, programs for commencement and Founders Day. We have some programs from convocation, homecoming, different anniversary celebrations, for instance. And in our athletics collection, it's mostly football and basketball. We do have some photos, some admin files, and athletic director's files. Unfortunately, we don't have much paperwork on any of the other athletic teams over the years. So if anybody has some out there, I'd be very excited to see those and possibly get those for our records. Now, the special collections is kind of just like it sounds. In this case, our special collections include books from the different periods of time of ECSU's history. So, for example, we have books from when the Rosenwald School was active, from when it started out as life as the normal school. We have books from when it changed to the Teachers College, then when it was the Elizabeth City State College, and then, of course, today. We have a lot of the media and legacy equipment from the radio station, actually, as part of the HBCU Radio Preservation Project. We're working on getting a lot of that digitized now, and a lot of it's going to be online. And hopefully you've already seen some advertising on how to access that. But if you have any questions, again, always feel free to contact us. We also have some ROTC items from when they were the last ones to use the Rosenwald School as an office classroom setting before the rehabilitation project began and the restoration. So we do have some of those items that we've collected. And we have many, many photographs. Not all are labeled. So we do have some unknown, unidentified photos. We have best organized those as we can in subjects, sometimes by decades if we can tell if they're dated. I would like to put this out there that if anyone has any types of documents, photographs, anything on the history of the school that they would like to either donate or let us even scan to include as part of the collection, we are always welcome to finding some information that may fill in some of the gaps that we have. For instance, a lot of our files on some of our founding, not presidents necessarily, but just people involved with the university in the early days. A lot of their papers that we do have are photocopies from, for instance, papers that are at the state archives. So we don't actually have originals. We are, to my knowledge, there's still only one known photograph of Hugh Cale, for instance. That was a composite of legislators from that time period that served at the same time he did. And Elisha Overton is another example that I've been searching for more photos of him, especially that are clearer of his face, so we can include those with his collections. Because we have several that are at a distance, so it's a little bit hard to tell exactly what he looked like. But another little spot of research, if anybody has information out there, is the Lane family that was his father-in-law after all. In case people are searching for genealogy information in our collections, we do have a little bit that we can help you with, and we can also point you in the direction, whether it's some other local history collections and others that have already done some research that would be helpful. And just to share another interesting note of one interesting collection that we got as a donation in the last, a couple months, I guess it was. We were contacted by someone in Virginia who was cleaning out his mother's belongings and found this. And I don't want to say too much because I want to be able to reveal it as an exhibit and as part of, when I get to do some deep diving and some research to find out more information first. But it was very fascinating, very fascinating documents that I think will shed some light possibly on some other ECSU connections, definitely Pasquotank County history and families. But there's also a plantation I can't remember the name of right now, but I believe it has a connection. But again, I want to be able to do the proper research before I reveal too much. And I believe it is also tied into some of the land that the Coast Guard base is on right now. So all that to say, whenever we get donations, whether they are seemingly random or directly connected to ECSU or just a local area, we do love to get donations. We do love to do research. There's not always the time to do it, unfortunately, but it is always a fascinating trip into the past and history, and to discover these rich ties and stories from the past. We will someday hopefully be able to also do some oral histories tied to this, but for now, we are also, again, always looking for documents, information, and materials that can help shed some light and further these rich connections and this heritage, and to keep the legacy alive and going for this next generation coming. And we try to make things as relevant and connected as we can. And yeah, if we don't connect with our past, we don't know where we've come from. So that being said, I can't wait to share more interesting discoveries with you next time. And please reach out anytime. Thank you for joining us for another episode of Legacy 1891, Preserving the Past for the Future. And we'll see you next time.